Hello my friends! If you watched the previous episode of the series, you probably remember that we finished work on Hellcat on the markings. Am I right? I think so. Today will be the last stage of work on the model, but not the last episode of the series. Everything will be clear in a moment, and for now I start the weathering and detailing. Oh, no. I promised to make some spare belts for tools, and that's where I start. Strips of paper that I cut out of the building instruction were glued to the model and enriched with tiny metal elements imitating buckles. I can say that it turned out better than I expected. Quickly paint in a color imitating leather and done. Before I start the wash, there are two more thin layers of glossy varnish so that all decals don't silver. I was wondering if it was worth applying a camo netting, and whatever to make a separate video about it, because I think I didn't know movies on YouTube that satisfied me with their content in this subject. Of course there were some nice ideas, but they didn't quite meet my expectations. Also, such a film about making masking nets will be made in the future. I already have a plan of how it should look like and what it should contain. But let's go back to Hellcat. I decided to add a net, and it will be a captured German net, the simplest one to make. Of course you have to remember that there were many types of such camo even in one army, but here will be the minimum version. With ordinary bandage we can make a nice effect that will diversify our model, but it must be done with sensitivity. I had a piece of dried bandage, but it's very easy and it can be done at the same time as impregnating the material with glue. Just mix water, paint and some PVA glue and soak the material in it. Then we take it out on a piece of paper towel or squeeze and unfold it. When it dries a little but is still flexible, you can add the mesh on the model. I always use a brush and diluted glue for this and set the arrangement on the shape of the vehicle. In the case of Hellcat, I will additionally form places near the hatches because the crew will be landing on the edges and it will be good if the mesh will stick to their shoulders. Now I can take care of the proper weathering, so the wash is first. I chose black-brown from Modeler's World and the thinner from the same company. Once again I am convinced that it's great product and that it is just perfect. Yeah. It spreads very well, it's thin so it doesn't change the color of the paint it's applied to, and what is important, it smells good. By the way, today I will be working almost all the time on these company products. The most of my work on the turret was to process all the stowage and tarps. Telling the truth, I did the wash 2 times to have no doubt that all the details are properly emphasized as I wanted. I spent some time cleaning the excess, but it also gave me the opportunity to obtain additional effects on some elements that I can describe as utility dirt. In the meantime, I would like to say thank you to my patrons who support my channel and creators like me. If you also would like to become my patron, check the link in the description or at the end of this film and see what you can get at each level. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and feel free to leave your comments below and give a like to this video. Don't be an ass and join the team. I put the turret aside for a moment and went back to the camouflage net, which was already completely dry and ready for further work. And that was old-fashioned dry brushing. Yeah, exactly. The light paint which I was painting the wooden elements earlier was rubbed on the green mesh, and thus it was even more contrasted on the background of the dark color on the model. This was exactly what I wanted to get. Now I could do the wash on the hull. This work went much faster than the turret, probably due to the shape and amount of details. At the same time, the wash was also used here to make streaks and stains. I was quite generous applying the wash on the wheels. I didn't even care when a stain caused by the excess appeared in some places. The weathering paints and pigments are going to do the right job there in a minute. The next stage of work is a triple application of the weathering paints mentioned before. I started with the darkest color and airbrush it on the most invisible places. It's a kind of color filter but with a higher intensity than an oil paint filter, but at the same time it has a much lower intensity than ordinary paint. The second color was a bit darker, but I would rather classify it as a thick dark color. This one was placed on more visible surfaces. In the meantime, I decided that it's worth covering the model with a thin layer of matte varnish, which I did. This product is as good as wash and weathering paints, and I would recommend it to anyone. Well, now the brightest color, which is the most visible on the dark paint of Hellcat. I can say it's a typical dust. In addition to airbrush application, I also did a bit of standard work with a regular brush. You can see it on the wheels mostly. It will be a very good base for pigments that will appear on the model in a moment. The bottom of the model is a place that is very often treated as it wasn't there, and many modelers don't paint it or do weathering. I realize that it's actually the least visible place, but you can practice here and check the effects of various products. Because later we will cover our tests with proper weathering, for example mud and stains, which most often appear in this place on vehicles that visit a larger part of the exercise site than just a concrete driveway. Especially the war vehicles, which spend 99% of their lives in the mud. So now you can check how I work with weathering paints on this area. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are starting to play with pigments, which is also the biggest mess on the workbench. I fixed the pigments with the Abteilung fixer, which I still had some left in the bottle and I wanted to use it so it wouldn't go to waste. The whole process is clearly visible, so for now I won't bother you with my talk. When you will make the dusting of the wheels, pay attention to the way I create marks on the rubber rims. You can apply the pigment with a brush and rub with your finger, but also roll it around the particles, and this will create a completely different effect. Of course, the idler wheels, which are all steel, were properly polished with a pencil. The road wheels are glued permanently, and now I have to prepare the trucks. The entire sections were painted with weathering paints exactly the same as on the hull, from the darkest to the lightest, and then with the same mixture of pigments I stained them. Of course, for the pigments to stick to the surface I soaked them with a fixer, and after drying I started polishing with a soft pencil. After applying, I will polish the edges again, because during assembly some of the graphite will wear off the edges and it won't shine as it should. The application of quick tracks was very easy, and thanks to the connection links that the producer added, it didn't cause any problems. All the wheels were glued to the model, and now you can only see how cool the pigments and their different colors have done. I'm very happy with the effect. Note the light matte on the rear vehicles, which brightens these elements very much, and thanks to the contrast they are very visible. As I said before, an additional polishing on the installed tracks with the same pencil is indicated. On the wheels I added some metallic abrasions, those that I painted earlier but dyed under weathering paints and pigments. Now you just have to wipe it gently with a pencil and we have a metallic finish again. Speaking of the metallic finish, I remembered that I had to make some rust on the crowbar. Just a little bit for the eye's interest. Rust to wash in an amount of less than a small drop. If anyone wanted to know how much it is, it's very little. When it dried up, I put on weathering paint in dark rust color to finish the tool. Of course, again in a very small amount. The effect is great. On this model I used the pencil probably the most of all my models I have made so far. Well, it's very useful stuff. The towing cables got a bit of rusty wash, but it was really very delicate. And of course polish with a pencil. This is another super easy idea to make the right look on some elements. Okay, now we can start making dust. I don't know why my camera went stupid and I saw it after I uploaded the film to my computer. This cold shade is not a tragedy, but forgive me for this flaw. Applying the pigment directly to the model and on the matte surface is associated with a certain risk. Namely, removing it will always leave a trace, less or more. Therefore, it's necessary to do it with caution and determine in advance where it should appear. As you can see, I used a regular application brush and a white and very soft brush for blending and drawing the excess off the model. The effects are clearly visible and you can decide if you like it and use on your models or skip it definitely. The bottom is completely dry, so I can do some scratches. A toothpick is good enough. Oil stains are really easy to paint. You just have to consider their size and placement. On dusty surfaces they will do a good job of adding an interesting look. Of course, all kinds of stains are recommended. The same method of application can be used when dirty water is added. We can splash water and make any stains that usually appear on dusty surfaces. Sometimes it's worth looking at pictures of real vehicles where you can see various stains on horizontal and vertical surfaces. And with these effects, that is the easiest way to make them. In this vehicle the exhausts are on the top. You cannot forget about them because it's another place that after proper treatment will bring something interesting to our model. Now a bit of old school dry brushing. In this way I brightened all the tarps using light grey-green paint. Of course it would be better to use special dry brushing brushes for this task, but I don't have such brushes, so I have to work with what I have. But even so, the effect is okay. Dusting the turret elements is the same as on the hull. It's worth doing so that both these basic elements of the model work together. One of the last items to do was a machine gun which had the metallic pencil abrasions and some pigment dust which may surprise some of you. Contrary to appearances, this element is dust in the same way as others, and it's enough to look at the pictures of modern vehicles in service where this effect is very clearly visible. Of course you shouldn't overdo it, but keep in mind that it will be an interesting touch. When we have the Browning, some shells will also be useful. Fortunately, Master Model produced such a set. I forgot to show it in the Open the Box, you have the link at the top, but now I'm catching up. The package contains 25 metal pieces which are a mega addition. I know that they aren't cheap, but nobody said that this hobby is cheap. Never mind. I always say that you have to paint all these elements on the model, but this one is the one I don't paint. I do the wash only. and on the model I stick it with pigment cement. It doesn't leave stains, but even if it does appear, it can be covered with a little amount of pigment. Almost done with this kit, just a little thing copied from a photo from the war and the model is ready. But wait a minute, something is missing. Yes, I know, there is no chain. I quickly put a piece on the front plate and finally the model is ready. Couple drops of glue will keep it on the place. Well, what do you think about it? Personally, I really like its silhouette. Next to the Panther, it's the coolest World War II shape. I know it sounds funny, but that's how I feel. In general, I think I was able to reflect the atmosphere of this vehicle, especially the Eureka XXL kits with the entire stowage were helpful. Everything else is of course an individual matter, but you admit that the vehicle looks used. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is the second to last episode of this series. For now I put the model on the shelf because I have to wait for the delivery of elements for the base. Therefore, I'm starting a new project and I will come back to that as soon as possible. Then I will show you the construction of a small diorama for this model. Thanks for watching. If you like my channel, don't forget to subscribe, like and leave a comment. As I said before, you can also be my patron and have access to top secret content that only appears there. That's all for today. I'll see you all in the next video. Cheers!